Perfect. Your phrase, have you ever wondered what would happen if Robin Hood was not a legendary hero, but one of the most feared killers in history? Today's story completely changes everything we know about the famous outlaw. Instead of a noble hero who stole from the rich to help the poor, this film presents Robin Hood as a broken man whose violent past has turned him into a living nightmare. Our story begins in the middle of a brutal winter. Snow covers the land, food has become almost impossible to find, and survival itself feels like a miracle. A young girl struggles through the freezing wilderness, desperately searching for anything she can eat. After hours of wandering, she finds only a few wild berries. They are far from enough to satisfy her hunger, but they are all she has. Exhausted and unable to continue, she collapses into the snow. A passing deer eventually wakes her. For a brief moment, she watches it disappear into the forest, knowing it could save her life, if only she had the strength to hunt it. Then she notices something in the distance. A small fire. With her last remaining strength, she slowly walks toward it. Sitting beside the fire is an old traveler roasting a rabbit. The smell of fresh food overwhelms the starving girl, and she begs him for just one bite. Instead of showing kindness, the old man studies her carefully. He calmly tells her that pretending to be a boy will not protect her. Her face reveals the truth immediately, and if the wrong people discover it, they will make her suffer before killing her. The girl answers without fear. I am not afraid. I'm only hungry. She explains that the stories of Robin Hood have inspired her to keep fighting for another day. But the old traveler suddenly laughs. According to him, Robin Hood was never a hero. He was a murderer, a thief, a man whose name became a beautiful lie told by people who... While General Varick prepared the northern wall for another attack, the greatest danger wasn't outside the kingdom. It was already inside the palace. Far away in the royal capital, the old king lay dying. Age had stolen his strength, but not his wisdom. He knew the kingdom was changing, and he knew darkness was returning. Only one question remained. Who would wear the crown after him? The king sent an urgent letter, not to his eldest son, but to General Varick, the greatest warrior in the kingdom, the one man every soldier would gladly follow into death. When the message reached Varick, he immediately left the northern wall. Before leaving, he gathered his commanders. If I do not return quickly, you will hold this wall, no matter what happens. The soldiers saluted. None of them knew this goodbye would change their lives forever. Days later, Varick finally reached the capital. But something felt wrong. The streets were unusually quiet. The palace guards avoided looking him in the eyes. Even the servants whispered in fear. It was as if the palace itself was hiding a terrible secret. Inside the king's chamber, old ruler struggled to breathe. His eldest son, Prince Corvin, stood beside him. Where is Varick? The king asked. He rides here now, father, Corvin replied. The king smiled weakly. Good. The kingdom will need him. Those words destroyed everything. Because Corvin had spent his entire life believing the throne belonged to him. Hearing his own father choose another man filled him with hatred. The king closed his eyes for only a moment. Corvin slowly reached beneath his cloak. A jeweled dagger appeared in his hand. His own father looked up, confused. Corvin, what are you doing? Without another word, Corvin drove the dagger straight into the king's chest. The old king gasped. Blood covered the royal bed. His own son had murdered him. Footsteps echoed outside. Someone was coming. Thinking quickly, Corvin pulled a second dagger from his belt.
an identical weapon, one that had belonged to Varric. Months earlier, he had secretly stolen it. Now, he placed it beside the king's body. Every piece of the trap was ready.
The following morning, the wounded boy Robin had shot somehow manages to stay alive long enough to reach the edge of his village. Before collapsing, he warns everyone that armed killers have attacked the farmhouse. Within minutes, the entire village is thrown into chaos. Men gather their weapons. Women hide the children. And the village elder, a powerful warrior known as the Wise One, puts on his old armor and takes up his massive warhammer. Justice is coming. Back at the farmhouse, Little John gives Margaret a proper farewell. With great care, he washes her body and lays her peacefully on a table. For a man once known only for violence, it is a heartbreaking moment. Robin watches silently. He has never seen his closest friend show so much love and sorrow. That night, the villagers finally arrive. Without warning, they surround the farmhouse and set it ablaze. Flames quickly spread across the wooden walls, turning the peaceful home into a burning prison. Robin grabs his bow and fires an arrow, killing one attacker instantly. Another man traps Robin inside a burning barn, hoping the fire will finish him. But Robin refuses to die. Using his knife, he cuts through the wooden wall, wounds the man outside, and escapes through the flames. Seconds later, he brutally kills his attacker by forcing a burning torch into the man's throat. Meanwhile, Little John rushes outside carrying young Margaret to safety. But standing before him is the Wise One. The old warrior finally revealed the truth. 20 years ago, Robin Hood and Little John murdered his brother and destroyed his entire family. He has spent decades waiting for this moment. Tonight, he will finally have his revenge. Robin, still badly injured, grabs a heavy farming tool and attacks the Wise One. The fight is short and hopeless. The Wise One is far stronger. One devastating swing of the warhammer shatters Robin's leg. Another crushes several of his ribs. Robin collapses onto the ground, barely able to breathe. Believing Robin is already dying, the Wise One turns his attention toward Little John. But John disappears into the thick smoke. Using the darkness to his advantage, he silently moves. 3 days after the trial, Commander Cale arrived at the last wall. It stretched across the frozen mountains like a scar carved into the earth. The fortress was old. Too old. Its stones had survived countless winters, but they had never faced an army like the one marching toward them now. The commander of the garrison greeted Cale without a smile. You won your freedom, only to be sent here. Cale looked across the endless white horizon. No. I was sent here because someone expects this wall to fall. Before another word could be spoken, a lookout shouted from the highest tower, "Movement in the valley!" Everyone rushed to the battlements. At first, they saw only snow. Then, black shapes emerged from the blizzard. Hundreds. Then thousands. Then tens of thousands. An army unlike anything living men had ever witnessed. The Dark Horde had arrived. Behind the soldiers rolled massive siege towers, catapults taller than houses. Armored beasts dragged iron battering rams across the ice. And standing at the center, a king dressed in black armor. He raised his sword. The entire valley shook with the roar of his warriors. Cale whispered, "So, the stories were true.
Inside the fortress, panic spread quickly. Many soldiers had never fought a real war. Some prayed. Others quietly wrote letters they knew would never be delivered. Kale climbed onto the wall. If anyone wishes to leave, no one will stop you. Silence. Not a single soldier moved. Kale smiled. Then today, we stand together. The horns of the enemy echoed across the mountains. The first catapult stone smashed into the outer wall. A second followed. Then a third. The siege had begun. Flaming arrows darkened the sky. The defenders answered with volleys of their own. Men fell on both sides, but the horde kept advancing. As night fell, a scout burst into Kale's command room. "My lord, they're not attacking the gate.
The mountain trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling as the enemy's tunnels reached the foundations of the last wall. Commander Kale led a small group of soldiers into the darkness beneath the fortress. Only the light of their torches guided them. Then, they heard it. The sound of thousands of picks striking stone. The enemy wasn't trying to climb the wall. They were trying to erase it. Kale raised his hand. Quiet. Ahead, the tunnel opened into an enormous underground chamber. Hundreds of enemy miners worked beneath massive wooden supports. One command, and the supports would burn. The mountain would collapse. The last wall would fall forever. Kale knew there was only one chance. If those beams ignite, the kingdom dies. Without another word, he charged. Steel flashed in the darkness. The narrow tunnels became a battlefield. Every step forward cost another life. At last, Kale reached the central chamber. The enemy commander smiled. Too late. He dropped a burning torch. It landed among barrels of black powder. The explosion shook the mountain. The ceiling cracked. Massive stones crashed down. Kale threw himself toward the burning fuse. Ignoring the flames, he grabbed it with his bare hands and smothered the fire beneath his cloak. The explosion stopped, but the collapsing tunnel trapped him inside. His soldiers hacked through the fallen rocks until they reached him. Bruised and barely breathing, he was still alive. Above them, the enemy launched one final assault. The gates burst open. Thousands of warriors poured into the fortress. The defenders fell back to the inner courtyard. There was nowhere left to retreat. Kale climbed the broken steps of the central tower. He lifted the kingdom's banner high above the battlefield. As long as this banner stands, so do we. The exhausted soldiers answered with one final roar. They charged together. The fighting lasted until sunrise. When the first rays of light reached the mountains, the enemy king stepped forward to finish the battle himself. He and Kale met in the ruins of the gate. Sword against axe. Neither warrior yielded. Finally, the enemy king overreached. Kale turned aside the blow and drove his sword through the tyrant's armor. The warlord fell. Seeing their king defeated, the invading army lost its courage. Some fled into the mountains. Others surrendered,